Hi, I'm Carol Seifer, and I'd like to share some thoughts with you today about cubic right angle weave. I know I can almost see you wince. Some of us find that right angle weave business a little pesky, that always changing direction as we stitch, but I'm going to offer you some tips today that will provide you with the same repetitious elemental steps that we're comfortable and familiar with. Like in peyote stitch, you know, it was the stitch that many of us began our bead weaving careers with, and it was the same instructions over and over. Pick up a bead, skip a bead, pass through a bead. Well, I'm going to offer you a way to do right angle weave, and therefore cubic right angle weave, reproducing the same little steps over and over, and so you can achieve that same blissful, meditative, repetitious beadwork that we enjoy. Now, you could use several different methods to achieve the look of the cubic right angle weave. These little pieces could have been done as two layers of right angle weave that were sewn together and would have the same appearance as cubic right angle weave. But instead we're going to build individual little cubic building blocks, if you will, of beadwork using 3 units of right angle weave. When we connect the first unit of the right angle weave to the last unit of the right angle weave, we achieve a little cube of 6 sides. Your next obligation in pursuing the cubic right angle weave beadwork is to decide which of those 6 sides will be the common side with the next building block. So when you've determined which of those sides will be the common side, we're going to call that side Unit 1 of the next 3 units necessary to build another cubic right angle weave unit. So you can see that we're going to repeat the same easy steps over and over. Now I've chosen some larger vinyl beads and some wax linen and a darning needle, and I'm going to put the camera on the beads so that you can see me do the beadwork in these larger beads, and we'll discuss the stitch up close and personal. Let's get our chops with right angle weave by turning out a few units right now using these simplified steps I would suggest. So we're going to pick up 1 bead, so you start with 1 bead, add 3 beads to that bead. So we pass through that bead again, and that's our first unit of right angle weave. Now we're going to pass through 2 of the new beads, add 3 beads to the bead that your thread is exiting. So we pick up 3, add them to that bead, and pass through 2. So our mantra is add 3 beads to the bead that the thread is coming from and pass through 2. And we'll make 1 more. Pick up 3 beads, add them to the bead you're coming out of, and pass through 2. So right here we have 1, 2, 3 units of cubic right angle weave, of right angle weave. Now it's difficult to see that because the beads are oriented in different directions, but if I align them by putting something through here, it will illustrate to you the anatomy of the stitch. So we started with 1, we added 3 and passed through 2. We added 3 and passed through 2. We add 3 and pass through 2, add 3 and pass through 2. Now, we've resulted here in 4 units. This would be 1 too many units for cubic right angle weave, but I'm going to say, since we got our chops this way, and since this is an interesting result, I'm going to say let's close these 4 units up, or let's connect the last unit to the first unit, just as we would do with cubic right angle weave. So I'm going to pick up a bead and pass through the farthest bead, and I'm going to pick up a bead and pass into the bead I came from originally again. And I would suggest to you as a tip that in making cubic right angle weave from your right angle weave units, that you allow the work to be flat so that you can see the 2 beads that you've added and know exactly which beads to pass it through. If it's curled up, it's more difficult to identify the appropriate beads. So you could hold it in your hand flat, or you can hold it on the table, but either way. So once I've added my 2 beads, I'm going to pull the thread taut, and it curls the beadwork up to create a solid little unit. Now we're coming up out of a bead, so I'm going to advise that you make a right hand turn, hence the name right angle weave, and connect the beads on the top. So think of it as a 5-walled room, and we're going to connect the beads on the ceiling. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we need to connect the 5th bead to the 1st bead. See, there's no connection, so pass into the 1st bead again. And I would tell you to actually count those off to yourself so that you make sure no one is missed. Then make a right angle through a bead. I'm flipping the beadwork upside down so you can see this process take place on what was the bottom. So we repeat the process. Pass through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 5th bead is still not connected to that 1st bead, so we go into the 1st bead again. So this completes our unit. This happens to be the corner unit in these pentagon-shaped pendants that we're going to make in the magazine recipe. So this is the part that's in the corner. But it's also a dandy little item in its own right. These are bicone crystals that are these little units with a bead at the opening at the top of the bottom, and then they're strung on a strand with another bicone in between. So if we were to take one of the finished units out of the Swarovski crystals and pick up one bicone on a head pin, and then pick up our 5-walled or 7-sided unit and then another bicone, it results in this wonderful little crystal ball. It makes a fine earring. They're wonderful as little beaded beads. And they're also the corners in our pendant, in our pentagon pendant. So let's put this aside, and now that we've got our right angle weave chops, we'll turn out our 3 units only this time. So our mantra was to pick up a bead, add 3, pass through 2, add 3, pass through 2, add 3, pass through 2. So now, holding the beadwork flat, I'm going to pick up a bead coming from the last bead and go into the 1st bead again. And now I pick up a bead and return to this bead where I originated. Now that I see that I have my thread in the far end beads, I'm now able to pull the thread taut, which causes the beadwork to curl up into a perfect cubic right angle weave unit. The reason these thrill me so much is that they're like little building blocks. They're as enticing as the little beads themselves in the way they go together. So any 3-dimensional object that you can imagine, you can create one little cubic right angle weave cell at a time. Okay, so we're coming up out of a bead, we make a right angle and connect the 4 unconnected beads. So we pass through 1, 2, 3, 4, and remember, I would tell you to count them off so that you remember to go into 1 again, connecting 4 and 1. Make a right angle through a bead, and now connect the 4 unconnected beads on the opposite side of the cube. So again, we pass through 1, 2, 3, 4, and because 4 is not connected to 1, we need to pass through 1 again. So that completes our first cubic right angle weave unit. So it's a 6-sided block, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a top and bottom. So there's 6 sides.